بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي كل مكان، اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة وفي كل مكان. اللهم ثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم ونفس كربنا وكربهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا أكرم الأكرمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وإترته وأعوانه وأنصاره وإخوانه إلى يوم الدين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We have been looking at designer argument, designer argument or teleological argument. So we had started looking at it, and we had stopped here. The designer argument as the designer regarded as external to his material must always remain limited to his material, and hence a finite designer whose limited resources compel him to overcome his difficulties after the fashion of a human mechanician. This is a familiar Hegelian type of critique which we saw Allama Iqbal bringing in during his critique of cosmological argument. But let's have a look at it again. So the designer regarded as an external to his material. So let's say the first cause or God is a designer and the universe is his design. So you have universe is external to him, and since it is external to him, it puts limits on him because it is outside. So that's a limit in a sense to him according to this position. I think it's a basic Hegelian precept that if you are a subject, and if object is totally outside you and its nature is outside you, then it's a limit on you. And according to Hegel's history, philosophy of history, the world history, the subjects struggle to overcome this alienation. And one subject understand the objects as his own self-expression, then that limit is somehow overcome because object is no longer separate to the subject. It's just a self-expression of the subject. In a similar manner, if the universe is external to the designer, then it puts a limit on the designer, and So somehow there was a material which was outside this designer, and a designer used his intelligence to design this, is still outside the designer, and presents limitation on his design. So he has to come up with mechanism to overcome those difficulties, those alienations, etc. So this can't be the God of theology, because the God of theology doesn't have limits. So let's go back. So the designer, regarded as external to his material, must always remain limited to his material, and hence a finite designer who has limited resources. Resources are limited because something external is limiting them. Resources are not necessarily finite or anything like that, necessarily, but his resources are limited by the externality of what he is designing, compel him to overcome his difficulties of the fashion of human mechanician. So this model of design is based on human experience, and in that sense, it is faulty, or it is a limited outlook, which doesn't behove the creator of the universe, or at least not God of the theology. The truth is that the analogy on which the argument proceeds is of no value at all. There is really no analogy between the work of the human artificer and the phenomena of nature. This is over the top, obviously, saying that the truth is that the analogy on which arguments are of no value at all. There is really no analogy between the work of human artificer and the phenomena of nature. Obviously, there is analogy, and people have drawn that analogy, or drawn up on that analogy from time immemorial. And in fact, in modernity, this analogy has vastly diminished because of the rise of mechanistic philosophy. But anyway, the human artificer cannot work out his plan except by selecting and isolating his material from their natural relations. What are natural relations and situations? Nature, however, constitutes a system of wholly interdependent members. But the thing is, the teleological argument work on this very observation that the universe is wholly interdependent. And where does this interdependence comes? Where does this interdependence come from? So that's what lead to the analogy on which a design argument is based. So nature, however, considers a system of wholly interdependent members. Her processes present no analogy to the architect's work. But no analogy. I mean, analogy is not exact similarities. Analogies work on similitude rather than exact similarities. So I don't think this is a very good critique. So nature, however, constitutes a system of wholly interdependent members. Her processes present no analogy to the architect's work, which, depending on a progressive isolation and integration of its material, can offer no resemblance to the evolution of the organic wholes of nature. So, I mean, his vision is that nature, and that's a Hegelian vision again, nature is organic, so it doesn't need uh, a designer outside it. So it's in a sense a pantheistic view, which Hegelian view is there's nothing outside um, the absolute. There's nothing outside God. The whole nature, everything is the self expression of the whole, or the absolute, or God, or Geist, or whatever you want to call it. So the analogy of organic self development is relevant here. So that's the basic um, criticism, or the basic critique, or the basic objection to design argument from a Hegelian viewpoint. The first is obviously it's a limit. If you see the nature as external to the designer, then it's a limit on the designer. So you must see nature as a self-development, and the organic development, so development from a seed, potential to actuality. Again, the Aristotelianism is also relevant to Hegel, but obviously through Kant and Spinoza and all that. So the analogy of organic self-development is apt here. But from our perspective, I think design argument is powerful, but the basic problem with design argument, like any other argument for the existence of God, is that it's not conclusive. And if it is not conclusive, then obviously it can't decide the debate purely on rational ground. Okay, so he goes on to ontological arguments. So we'll stop here, and we'll start with ontological argument next time, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلي وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا